Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 5 stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. Before we start, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. But if you stick around, my friend Carmen here's just cooked up a new batch of cookies and some of them might be coming your way. Alright, on to the stories, let's jump right in. This story comes to us from SSN's Forever. Keep your phone calls in your pay grade. I was stationed on USS Sunfish, SSN 649, from 1991 to 1995. During the time I was there, the crew complement was 130 men, 14 officers, 12 chiefs, and 104 E6 and below blue shirts. The boat had 3 telephone lines. Having communicated with some of my friends and colleagues on other boats and mine, and our sister squadron, Submarine Squadron 6 and 8, I knew that some boats had their phone lines designated as COXO, Commanding Officer, Executive Officer, Officer and Chiefs, and the crew line. On Sunfish, however, the 3 phone lines were simply the 3 phone lines. If the phone rang, you picked it up and got the person asked for, or took a message. If you wanted to make a call, you chose whatever line was available. That is, until late 1993, when our new navigator reported aboard. The navigator is the operations department head, and is 3rd in command. The new navigator came equipped with his own great ideas on how things were going to be. One of his ideas included changes to the phone lines, which were under the purview of the operations department. Sunfish joined the cadre of boats with specifically designated phone lines. Per his orders, only the CO, XO, and Yeoman, the executive department, were to use the COXO phone line. Only officers and chiefs were to use their designated phone lines, and of course, the crew had their line. The navigator discussed this policy every single day at muster time. Why? Because everyone rolled their eyes and simply disregarded the new rule. Everyone disregarded the new rule up until he started inspecting. Because, of course, you can't expect much if you're willing to inspect. When he saw someone talking on the phone, he'd check what line they were using. Of course, he never checked anyone in the executive department. He bothered the chiefs a bit until the chief of the boat, Command Master Chief, told him to F off and not to talk to his chiefs. The navigator did, however, chew out the officers and blue shirts whenever he caught them using the inappropriate phone for their pay grade. People started grumbling. The navigator stepped up his game soon enough though, as his phone inspections and butt chewings weren't getting him the quick results he wanted. He had the officers follow his lead. For any calls for blue shirts on the wrong phone line, the caller was directed to call back at the appropriate phone number, then the call was ended. Crap hit the fan. The phones were located in the attack center, Yeoman's office, and the wardroom. While many people go to the AC throughout the day, the fire control techs and quartermasters were the only ones who primarily occupied that workspace. Previous to the new navigator's arrival, they had to listen to that phone ringing constantly all day. With the navigator's new policy, they muted both the COXO and Officer Chief lines. The navigator forbade the crew from muting any phone lines except for the YN in their office, but whenever he asked who muted those lines in the AC, he just got blank stares and shrugs from whoever happened to be there. As soon as he left, the non-blue shirt lines ended up muted again. Nobody ever wants to answer the phone and have to go running all over the boat to find people. But now, the crew started doing the same thing as the officers did. If the phone call was for anyone above the pay grade of E6, they simply told them to call back on the correct line and hung up. Suddenly, quite a bit of work was not getting done. Messages weren't getting passed. Maintenance with our assigned submarine tender was suffering, due to them not knowing anything about our designated phone lines. Of course, not many people were willing to walk up and down all those decks on the tender, then down the pier when they couldn't get through on the phone. The navigator tried to make the cooks answer the wardroom phone, as the wardroom was one of their workspaces. The cooks were always busy, and were never good about answering the phones to begin with. Sometimes they would answer the blue shirt phone because they were blue shirts, but never the officer or chief line unless an officer was in the wardroom to see them ignore the ringing phone. The cook would laugh that if they answered the officer or chief line, they'd simply tell the caller to hold on, set the receiver down, and walk away. Things simply didn't go well regarding the new phone policy. Leadership, namely the navigator, created the problem. Leadership was blamed for all the setbacks in maintenance and repairs. Leadership was blamed by all the families having trouble reaching their family members aboard ship. The chiefs suffered their setbacks, but were humored by the crap show, and the blue shirts started to love the new phone policy. They got to watch a bunch of things burn down. Of course, when we answered the phone, we had to identify the boat, that the call was on a non-secure line, and state our name, but everyone talked so fast that there was no understanding or accountability as to who answered the phones. It was truly a "the beatings will continue until morale improves" situation. By the numbers, most of the crew made a good time of the whole situation and really enjoyed pointing out that everything was great until the new navigator showed up. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called CoderJoe1. It says, "Did they ever go back to the old policy?" OP responded to this one and said yes and no. The policy stayed, but the enforcement went out the window. Both of my next two boats had the same policy, with no enforcement except for the CO-XO phone line. Nobody really messes with their stuff. This was completely a rules for thee but not for me situation. I love how they tried to enforce their new rules, and they were a stickler about it for a while, until they realized that they weren't getting the messages that they needed to get in the executive department itself. This story comes to us from Exotic Equipments. Old boss told me to contact his lawyers, so I did. So this started some time back. I got fired from my job due to an injury and had to be hospitalized for a significant time. In my contract it stated that if I had more than X amount of sick days in a 12-month period, I could get my contract terminated with 1 month notice. So that happened, and of course I contacted my union. They told me it was a legal termination, but they asked about a specific part of my contract, which was about my commission. Turns out I've missed out on some special commission during my employment, and totally missed it when I read my contract when I got employed. Can't really get closer to which kind of commission due to my anonymity. My union advised me to contact the boss, show him the part of my contract and proof of the missing commission, and try to get a settlement. I was looking for what is equivalent to 3,000 euros. I went to see my boss and started with a nice chat. After about 10 minutes, I brought up the issue and showed him my contract and showed him that I've never gotten the commission stated in the contract. My boss told me straight up to contact his lawyers and that we were done talking and told me to leave. Cue Malicious Compliance. I went home, looked every paycheck through, and set up a meeting with a lawyer. We found a lot of small mistakes on my paychecks and summed it all up. We sent an official letter to his lawyers and got an answer from them a few days later. Now he was willing to settle for the first amount, equivalent to 3,000 euros. I smiled and laughed. No can do, Mr. Bossman. Not anymore. Now I want the full amount, which is equivalent to 10,000 euros plus pension, plus 15% in damages, plus all the legal fees. And I have proof of everything to back up my claim. Due date of the court, and guess what? He lost big time. I've now planned a nice vacation and still have more money than I asked for in the first place. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Fireflying. It says, "Excellent Malicious Compliance. I hope that you're better and you enjoy a wonderful holiday. Make sure to send your old boss a postcard." OP responded and said, "I'm a lot better than at that toxic work environment. I thought about sending a picture of me in a bathtub of money, but I thought to myself that I was the bigger man and will just enjoy the vacation without giving my old boss a single thought." OP, opportunity is knocking here, my friend. You could let all of your coworkers know about the discrepancies with the paychecks and maybe even turn them over to your lawyer. Your lawyer might even give you a finder's fee because of all the money that they would make off of everybody else that works there. This company can be taken for a lot of money if you went from only 3,000 euros all the way up to 10,000 euros because of the mistakes on your paycheck. OP, be a bro, talk to your coworkers and get them on board. This story comes to us from Rhonda the Honda. Stay in my lane? Okay, but it'll cost you. A few years ago, I was the primary faculty advisor and chair for admissions to a highly competitive health science program at a small public college. While that may sound impressive, it's basically a way of saying I was the lowest on the totem pole, but had all of the responsibility overseeing admissions for this program. In order to try and make the department even stronger, they added a new degree option to that health science program that largely overlapped with existing classes. In fact, the only change they had to make was to add one 8-credit-hour course to make the new degree option. Since I was so low on the totem pole, I had no part in the process for this, but as the lone advisor, I had to learn all of the ins and outs of it so I could advise students and potential applicants. Because of this, I found a problem where the new class was added to the course schedule and added to the college catalog, but it was not officially added to the new major. This would cause trouble for financial aid and, down the road, when they apply for graduation. It may seem like a small thing, but if it's not officially required for the major, financial aid won't pay for it. I pointed this out to my supervisor, who thanked me for catching it and asked me to inquire about how we correct this. So I sent an email to someone, middle management, who might be able to help, asking questions and proposing possible short-term solutions until the curriculum committee could meet to make the changes official. After the email, there was silence for a week. Therefore, I sent a follow-up email. The next morning, I received an email from one of the VPs chewing me out for overstepping my bounds, trying to make changes I didn't have authority to make, and a reminder that they know how to do their jobs, and that I was expected to stay in my lane. This email included my supervisor, multiple deans, 2 department heads, and another VP. Fine, I dropped it. I was already looking for other jobs and ended up leaving the following year, so what do I care? Fast forward 3 months, we were about 10 days away from this new class starting with the first cohort of 10 students in this new degree, and I started getting phone calls and emails from all over the place. The problem I pointed out still hadn't been fixed. Now, the financial aid and registrar's offices are dealing with angry students who just found out each will have to pay for an 8-credit class out of pocket. Both departments were reaching out to me asking for help to get this fixed before the VP found out about it. I just forwarded the email I received from the VP with a message that I was instructed to stay out of this and that their bosses were aware that I was not to be involved. It's officially not my problem. And to anyone who might say I should have helped and not screwed over the students, you're right. Unfortunately, there is absolutely nothing I can do at that point. That's why I tried to address it months ago when I could have helped. The proper way to make this happen involves making the proposed changes to a committee, then those changes would have to be approved by the executive board. For various reasons, this could not happen between then and the start of class. So, the VP contacted the state chancellor's office to see what kind of workaround the state would approve to get this done now. However, the college was denied any exceptions. In the end, the college ended up having to swallow the cost of this course for all 10 students. I don't remember how much it was, but it was no less than $25,000. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called TrueMoose4957. It says, "They effed around and found out. Your superiors are victims of their own egos. Good for you, OP." OP responded and said, "That VP is now the president at another college. I continue to follow his career just to ensure our paths don't cross again." Another commenter down below called MGBenny85 said, "Tell me when you forwarded the email, you copied the same list of crap heels that were included in the first place." OP responded and said, "Ha ha ha ha, No, I didn't. The thought didn't cross my mind at the time. Now, I wish I had. OP, I know you wanted to help the students in this case, but honestly, when you're told to stay in your lane, you need to stay in your lane. Otherwise, your job is in jeopardy. Especially when you have people above you, like you described in this story, who seem like they don't give a crap about you at all. They only care about themselves and padding their own pockets, and that they are the highest people in the hierarchy. This story comes to us from Sipke. Prove that you injured your leg? Sure. In my country, we have a tradition that when we finish elementary school, we jump into a fountain and splash around. I managed to mess that up by falling and injuring my leg. When I looked at my leg, blood was seeping through my sock. My leg hurt for days, and I avoided walking and standing. Another thing you need to know is that bus drivers are not gentle with buses at all. And buses are falling apart and rattling, so riding the bus while standing is very painful. Now, the story. I'm going to my friend's place in the suburbs, and the driver decided to use the entire speedometer. When I entered the bus, it was empty, so I sat in a seat that isn't really for older people or people with special needs, but it's not the narrowest either, just enough space for my legs. After 20 minutes, the bus became crowded, and at one stop, this woman entered. Americans would call her Karen, so I'll call her that too. Karen was around 50 years old, and as she was looking for a seat, she noticed me, probably because I was the youngest. The conversation went like this. "You young people never give up your seats for older ones." I would, but I injured my leg. "Excuse, get up now, or I'll force you." I'm not lying, my leg really hurts. It hurts even when I sit, let alone when I stand. Karen tried to pull me up, but I weighed 75 kilograms, even though I didn't look it, so she couldn't budge me. "Prove it." What should I prove? That I'm injured? Yes. Okay. I took off my shoe and sock, which was incredibly painful, in front of the whole bus. And also because I pulled it off abruptly, a scab came off and it started bleeding. The whole bus fell silent, except for a woman talking on the phone. "Are you enjoying watching my feet?" She got off at the next stop. I don't know if out of embarrassment or because it was really her stop. I just told the onlookers not to ask me anything and put on my headphones. I got off the bus a few stops later and, walking like a zombie, reached my friend's place. My sock was even bloodier by then, but it was worth it. OP added an edit at the bottom. It says, "The foot wasn't all that bad shape. I made a full recovery in 2 weeks. It was just a really painful first week. Incident happened one day after the fountain incident." Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user that is very well named, Pranker Joker. They said, "Give these Karens an inch and they demand to see your foot." Another user called Contrantier said, "Even not injured, you don't have to give up your seat for anyone. You young folks never give up your seat for us older people." I don't know you, and I don't owe you anything. Leave me alone, I was in this seat first. Of course, that's the elementary school appropriate version. Adult version would contain more profanity, laughing my butt off. OP responded and said, "In my country, you can find a video where lady didn't give up her seat and the other lady sat on her shoulders." Alright, OP said this lady was around 50 years old. What would have happened if somebody in their 70s or 80s got on? Do you think she would have gotten up and given her seat away to that person? I don't think so. I think I'm going to start mentioning in a lot more videos going forward a reminder that no, N-O, is a complete sentence. If somebody wants something from you and you don't want to give it to them, N-O, no, it's a complete sentence, and that should be all you have to say. This story comes to us from Spadeslinger. Not enough technical skills? Okay. Wasn't sure where to post this. First time poster, long time lurker. A little background. My father never properly learned to read and write. He came from a dysfunctional home, but that's another story. He was, however, very good at fixing cars. He worked at a junkyard since before I was born. I'll call this junkyard A. A lot of times, he would offer advice or even fix the cars of the customers on his own time as a side hustle. Another thing about my dad is he knew everybody. Anywhere we went, people would always stop him and speak to him, mostly asking about a problem they're having with their cars. It didn't matter where we went, even on vacation across the country, he ran into people he knew. The junkyard he worked at was originally owned by two brothers. They were good bosses, and he made a decent wage and had very good health insurance. They made good business there, and my father was the senior sales specialist. Business was so good, they bought a new location and built a new building and moved there. A few years later, the business was sold to a guy named Dave. Dave was alright, although we lost the health insurance. He stayed there for, I'd say, 8 or 9 more years. One day, out of the blue, Dave fires my dad and said it was because he didn't have enough technical skills. He couldn't hardly read or write, but he could use the computer one-handed to search the system for parts while on the phone with a customer. He and 2 or 3 other guys would be in the front to help customers, and my dad's line would have 2 or 3 people waiting, especially for him, and would refuse to be waited on by someone else. So he came home and filed for unemployment. He stayed home for maybe 3 weeks and was offered a job at another junkyard that was located between the city we lived and the next city over. Now comes the malicious compliance. Since my father was so well liked and everyone knew he got a raw deal from the junkyard A, they also switched businesses. All his longtime customers and friends now frequented junkyard B. Many used car dealerships had deals with my father for the junk cars they sold for parts or parts they needed for fixing their used cars. All these businesses also switched junkyards and followed my dad to junkyard B. This was a devastating hit to junkyard A's business. So bad, in fact, they ended up selling the business to the owners of junkyard B. As soon as the sale was finished, my dad was sent back to junkyard A, where he worked for the rest of his life. He actually died in the junkyard. Massive heart attack. The funeral was so full of people, there was not enough room for everyone in the funeral home. His funeral procession, the line of cars that drive uninterrupted from the funeral home to the cemetery, was over an hour long due to so many cars. My mom went to buy the plot next to his a few days after the funeral, and the lady working there said she had been working there for over 40 years, and it was one of the largest groups gathered for a funeral she had ever seen. He may not have been able to read or write very well, but he knew cars and he knew people. A lot of people. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Beautifly Wings. It says, "What a beautiful story. It amazes me how one person can touch so many lives. Your dad sounds amazing." Your dad may have never learned how to read or write, but he had a lot more knowledge than a lot of people who can read and write. I mean, these days, if you put a regular person in front of a car and tell them to point out the different parts of the motor, good luck with that one. One thing your dad definitely had was people skills, because if he didn't, people wouldn't have followed him wherever he went. OP, this is a very touching tribute to your dad and was a wonderful read.